morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our most prestigious audience from all over the world. We have almost 100 plus countries. Wherever you are, welcome to the Info-OBE Global Virtual Summit 2022. Today we have an outstanding speaker whom I personally know, and we have Professor George Koo, who is the Chancellor's Professor Emeritus of Higher Education at Indiana University. George founded IU's Center for Post-Secondary Research and the National Survey of Student Engagement, NSSE, and the related work or instruments for law students, beginning college students and faculty. He also he's also the founding director of the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment, NILO, as well as the Strategic National Arts Alumni Project, SNAP, the first ever in-depth look at the factors that help or hinder the careers of graduates of arts-intensive training high schools and post-secondary institutions. At Indiana University, he served as chairperson of the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies from 1982 to 84. He is the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. He was Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the School of Education, 1985 to 88, the Associate Dean of the Faculties for Bloomington Campus, 1997 to 2000. Professor George Koo has more than 400 publications and made several hundred presentations on topics related to institutional improvement, college student engagement, assessment strategies, and campus cultures. His recent books include Using Evidence of Student Learning to Improve Higher Education, Ensuring Quality and Taking High Impact Practices to Scale, 2013, High Impact Practices, 2008, Piecing Together the Student Success Puzzle, 2007, and Student Success in College, Creating Conditions That Matter, 2005 and 2010. He has been a consultant to about 400 institutions of higher education and educational agencies in the United States and abroad, a past president of the Association for the Study of Higher Education, ASHE. He served on the National Leadership Council for the Association of American Colleges and Universities, multi-year Liberal Education in America's Promise Initiative. In 2013, the Chronicle of Higher Education described George as a towering figure who really launched the field of assessment of institutional quality. His contributions have been recognized with awards from various groups, including the American Educational Research Association, the Association for Institutional Research, ASHE, Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, Council of Independent Colleges, National Association of Student Personnel Administrators, NASPA, National Center on Public Policy in Higher Education. NASPA named its award for outstanding contribution to literature and research after him in 2011. In addition, he received the Robert Zemsky Medal for Innovation in Higher Education from the University of Pennsylvania, the Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of Iowa, and the Distinguished Alumni Award and Educational Leadership Award for teaching from St. Cloud State University. Indiana University recognized him with several teaching excellence recognition awards, the Tracy Sonborn Award for a Distinguished Record of Scholarship and Teaching, and in 2014, the President's Medal for Academic Excellence, the highest honor the Indiana University president can bestow. So we welcome the outstanding speaker and world famous Professor George Koo. Thank you very much.
Well, gee, thank you. Is that introduction about me? It must be about somebody else. Greetings, colleagues. I'm delighted to be with you today. I'm going to talk about what constitutes a phrase that may be new to some of you, dispositional attributes, because to my mind, these have become essential 21st century competencies. That is, things that post-secondary institutions must pay more attention to. So what I'm hoping to do with you in my short time with you is to briefly set the stage, talk a little bit about what the world requires from university graduates around the world, then a little more depth on what I think these dispositional attributes contain, what they represent, why they're important, and then a few words about one of the most, I think, effective ways of helping students cultivate these dispositional attributes, and that is participation in high impact practices, and then a few more thoughts about how we can be certain that our university graduates specifically are leaving with these well developed. So no surprise, no matter where we are in the world today, what we need is a citizenry, people who are aware of what is going on around them, and also then have the proficiencies and ways of knowing and learning and interacting with others, so that they become, as I say, economically self-sufficient. That is, can they hold good jobs? Can they contribute to their community? Not just during or shortly thereafter, but can they continue to grow, develop these proficiencies and skills throughout their lifetime? Often we have talked many years about so-called soft skills, the kinds of things that enable a person to interact effectively with others and achieve success. But these are no longer soft. They're actually what I'm considering essential. They're hard to measure, these interpersonal and intrapersonal competencies. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, because they are absolutely critical in terms of the kinds of outcomes and lifetimes that we want for our graduates. I have been surprised over the years. Google, a worldwide employer, I don't know, there are 80,000+ people who work for Google around the world. And when we asked, not me personally, but when their managers, Google managers, were asked, assuming candidates for jobs that you have open meet the qualifications, what else will set a candidate apart so that you are more likely to hire this person? And this list is the kinds of things that Google managers look for, they want in their employees. And these are words that we tend not to find very often in university catalogs. We tend not to emphasize these in the programs of study our students pursue, but they are very, very important to success. And I'm going to argue not just at Google, but in almost any possible walk of life. The generosity, empathy. Sometimes we'll see the word emotional intelligence, and there's a lot of conversation about effective communication and so forth, but egalitarian sensibilities, recognizing that everyone has value to add to an organization. Our critical task is to figure out how to pull that out of them. So when I say dispositional attributes, and I hope you'll be thinking along with me in terms of your own teaching and learning and responsibilities in the educational system and beyond, interpersonal, right? Being able to express oneself authentically, accurately, but also being able to interpret what others are saying and doing, and being able to respond in an appropriate fashion. The intrapersonal competencies, knowing what one is thinking, how one is thinking, being conscientious, starting and finishing tasks on time. That last word in that bullet, resilience, being able to handle problems and challenges and opportunities as they come to you, and pressing on in the context of very difficult circumstances. And then these neurocognitive competencies, the crystallized intelligence, that's learning from reading and lectures and so forth. But the fluid intelligence is becoming increasingly important, which represents being able to apply what you're learning and change what you know and how you know it, given circumstances you're encountering. And this last bullet becoming increasingly important, we know, to helping students succeed in college. And again, we don't offer major fields of study. We don't tend to talk about these things very often, but the notion of growth mindset, recognizing that I can learn beyond what I currently know and again, helps with all these earlier dispositional attributes as well. So this is what I mean by dispositional attributes. And most institutions, while they may value these kinds of behaviors, and certainly employers are saying more and more about the importance of these, most institutions don't assess these outcomes. The American Association of Colleges and Universities, AAC&U, which Wajid mentioned in the introduction of me, they have developed a set of essential learning outcomes, ELOs, and there are other outcome frameworks, not just in the US, but around the world, but most of these only indirectly address what I'm referring to as the interpersonal and intrapersonal competencies. And these are just screenshots. And I should say that both of these frameworks in the US are currently being revised because they've been around for a decade or more. And you'll see at the bottom of this screen, and hopefully you'll have access to these slides, links to these documents and other material. I mentioned that these frameworks, at least in the US, only indirectly address, or in some instances, with a bit more specificity, the value rubrics of the AAC&U. They do have a rubric by which you can, if you will, measure one's proficiency in working with other people, that is teamwork, ethical reasoning, and a lot of institutions increasingly are developing their own specialized rubrics. I give an example here of a community college in the US and a link to how they are trying to tweak these rubrics so that they are a little more sensitive to the kinds of dispositional attributes I'm talking about. And this is just a screenshot, a list, if you will, of how AAC&U is representing this work with what they call their value rubrics. There are 15 here. I'm not going to go through them, obviously, for the interest of time, but you can see the range of rubrics that are represented. And again, a very light emphasis on what I'm referring to as dispositional outcomes. And finally, I think probably the most effective, the most comprehensive, the best way of determining how much progress students have made and encouraging them to cultivate these dispositional attributes is through, I'm referring here, behavioral observations and performance assessments. When a student has, for example, taken on an internship or even post-university work, helping employers, helping universities discover how well graduates have been prepared to do certain kinds of tasks and demonstrate these dispositional attributes. But the last phrase here, high impact practices, as I said at the beginning, I believe participation in these kinds of activities during a university study can have a demonstrably positive impact on the cultivation of dispositional attributes. These are a list of what we have discovered in the US, a list of 11 kinds of activities, if you will, that almost every institution offers to some degree. I wish we had more time to go through this list. I've offered a link here at the bottom where you can, if you're not familiar with high impact practice, you can learn more about them. But the point here I'm making is that when a student has, for example, worked with a faculty member on undergraduate research, the category of inquiry and creative activity, they tend to benefit more in a variety of ways, or having had an internship or a capstone experience. And here's the reason why. If a student has done one or more of these kinds of activities, assuming it's done well, they have positive effects across a variety of outcomes, including here learning outcomes, but also they are more likely, if you will, to graduate. And we have tremendous challenges in terms of trying to get more and more students to finish what they start. They have what I'm referring to here as salutary effects. Students who come to university from being less well prepared academically, perhaps they are first in their family to go to the university. They come from historically underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. Students who have these backgrounds tend to get a boost in their performance, so that their performance looks very much like students who are from more affluent backgrounds, better well prepared academically, and so forth. Participation in a HIP tends to shrink the psychological size of a large university. That is, students get to know other small groups of students better. They get to know one or more of their faculty members better. And the more HIPs, the more one does, 3, 4, and 5 from that list I showed earlier, the more students benefit. This cumulative additive effect. They're more likely, even more likely to graduate, even more likely to participate and benefit from deep learning activities. And finally, almost all these activities require students to demonstrate that they can actually use what they are learning in the university. And of course, employers are very keen on wanting to hire graduates who can actually apply what they're learning. So HIPs it's just not the label, of course. I mentioned very briefly, if a high impact practice, of course, if any kind of teaching and learning experience is done well, students are more likely to benefit. And this is a list of the kinds of conditions that must be present for a kind of teaching and learning activity to have the desired effects: setting performance expectations at a reasonably high level, getting students to expend effort over an extended period of time, not just a 50-minute or 90-minute class hour. We want students involved in projects over the course, if you will, if we can, over the course of an academic term, which tends to require more effort and deepen their learning. Ongoing substantive interactions, right, with the teachers and peers, being exposed to diversity of viewpoints, not just racial, ethnic, but also intellectual, getting students feedback in this timely manner throughout a program of study, throughout an individual course of study, getting students, again, very important, to practice, right, what they are learning. And so they can see the relevance of what they're learning, making certain that students, putting them in situations, whether it's presentations or performance assessments. And very, very important, this last bullet, making certain that students are required to think about what is happening to them and to demonstrate that thinking either through journaling, discussion with peers, and so forth and so on. But this reflection piece is absolutely essential. And as I tipped a little bit earlier, I think the use of what's called e-portfolio can be very, very valuable in terms of documenting these kinds of dispositional attributes. The e-portfolio, as we think about it, is a way of approaching teaching and learning so that students are acquiring and documenting and putting together various performance as evidence of performance, whether they are the things that they are writing, the things that they have journaled about, and over time, a student can look in the company of an advisor, perhaps even other students, how for example, how their writing has improved over the course, not just of an individual academic term, but over the course of their university study. And so when we ask students to take their work, the things that they've actually produced, and to review it, reflect on it over time, students themselves can see in a more visible, tangible way what it is they now know and are able to do. And being able to take these kinds of portfolios and show external groups, whether it's employers, even family members, what they now know and can do is very, very critical toward the development and the deepening of these kinds of attributes and other proficiencies. This is just a list, if you will, of resources about ePortfolio in the event that anyone wants to dig a little bit deeper. I've highlighted the one second from the bottom because it's a particularly powerful study of how the use of ePortfolios can help students deepen learning within especially around the topic for today, these dispositional attributes. Dispositional attributes, my argument is that they are now an essential set of, we can call them proficiencies, perhaps. We need to spend more time thinking not just about what they represent, but how we can help students acquire and deepen and recognize that they are developing, cultivating these kinds of ways of knowing and learning and being in the world. So this quote from Aristotle, I think, is appropriate. You know, there are a lot of things about dispositional attributes we don't know. And especially we've got major challenges in terms of how we might try to help institutions assess them in a way that both students and institutions can benefit. So I thank you very much for your time, Waji, and I'm happy to respond to questions if one wants to reach out to me through email. But Waji, I'll turn it back to you at this time.